3, 2, 1.
How about we do it again?
6, 7, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think I followed it.
Okay, let's try one more
I
time.
definitely
Ready?
I can move you. Making review. Making review.
Say
6,
6, 5,
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Greetings, Rank and Review listeners. Welcome to a very different episode of Rank and Review. A very different episode of Rank and Review that's going to start with a very special announcement. Here's the thing. I've been hosting Rank and Review for about 5 years, close to. Your host and random Canadian is just another voice in an ocean of voices on the internet of movie nerds kind of bitching about the state of genre cinema. So, what makes me think like my opinion is valid? Why do I feel justified in, subjecting my personal opinions on you? Well, I love the arts. I love film. I love the theater. And as well as doing this podcast over the last 5 years, I've been making a movie. And on June 16th, 2018, that movie is going to have a test screening at the Broadway Theatre in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. There's going to be 2 shows, possibly 3, depending on how well the tickets are selling. People are going to be able to give their feedback on the film, and it's all in preparation to get my first feature film ready to go for the festival season in Canada this fall and in the new year of 2019. As a result, I've been a very, very busy podcast host. And as a result, you're getting a different episode this week. You're getting a different episode, and I'm just going to ask you earnestly. I've said it before, but I've never meant it more than I meant do it now, okay? Please help me spread the word on Book of Trespasses, my first feature film. Share the podcast, spread the word. I don't know when or how or even if this movie is going to be made available wide. If you're in reach of Saskatoon, please try and make it to the screening. If not, keep your eye on the Canadian festivals this year. But any way that I can spread the word on Book of Trespasses would be really, really valuable to me. My creative partners, Gareth, who you've heard on the show, Jared Berry, who you've heard on the show, we've put literally years of our lives to work at this. Thousands and thousands of dollars. We've won friends, we've lost friends, we've just put our heart and soul into it. So if you can share this podcast, if you can spread the word, Book of Trespasses, written by your host and random Canadian, Larry Parsons, and co-directed by your host and random Canadian, Larry Parsons. Nobody makes a movie by themselves, and this episode, instead of just doing 6 reviews because I'm a busy man getting ready for the screening, I am going to give you an excerpt from an interview I did with Jaron Francis a few years ago when I thought the movie was ready to go. Turns out we had to do some reshooting and we had to re-record some of our exterior sound, so it took another almost 2 years to get us to where we are here. But you can hear that I'm excited about the movie 2 years ago, and the movie looks and sounds even better today. So you can hear my trepidation, you can hear me excited about the film, but nervous that it's getting out there. And that trepidation and those nerves never went away. Not ever. I very rarely mentioned that I was even working on the film in the podcast because, I don't know, it just became too real. But it's real. We're doing a screening, and this is the fruition of a dream of mine. So you're not getting your average rank and review episode today. Like I said, you're going to hear an excerpt from an interview from Jaron Francis, who's another local writer, producer, director, actor. Very, very talented fellow. Was good enough to let me use this interview to fill out my podcast register because I didn't want to leave you guys hanging. We're going to talk a lot about the state of Saskatchewan film, and I know most of my listeners aren't in Saskatchewan, but I still think it would be worth you hearing about because it really feels like art's undervalued here. And I felt that way 2 years ago, and I kind of feel that way now. And to feel that way and still try to make your living in the arts, I don't know if I'm crazy or stupid or both. But I am your host and random Canadian Larry Parsons, and I do appreciate you listening. After that interview with Jaron, there's going to be a short excerpt from my appearance on the Terror Table with Mitch Oliver and Buziak, as we reviewed in length on that episode, Session 9. But what you're going to hear this episode is just an excerpt of me trying to actually take the pulse of the hosts of the Terror Table and see what movies they liked and didn't like. I brought some recommendations, and it's a fun little conversation. So if you're not interested in the state of Saskatchewan film, you may want to stick around for those RNR recommendations. Please, please, please send me feedback to ranknreview@gmail.com. That's ranknreview@gmail.com. Please do what you can to spread the word about my podcast and about my feature film. And thank you guys so much for listening. I think that's one of the things that will be interesting to talk about when we get into the actual process of writing it. Because when I sat down and decided that this was not going to be a play anymore, this was going to be a movie, but I'm going to write this movie that will be able to shoot in and around Saskatoon, cheap and easy. That's what I was telling myself as I was writing this script.
That was your mantra while writing? Cheap and easy.
But that's what I thought I was writing. And my point is that that's not what I was writing at all. That's what I thought I was writing, you know. Basically, any story that has multiple locations that takes place largely outside is not going to be an easy shoot, right? And that's what you learn, right? I'm not complete newbie to this. I did write and co-produce a short film a few years ago that went to the Yorkton Film Festival, but this is definitely the first time where I wade in past my waist and got deep in it. So
you spent was it over a year shooting, like just in the production phase, off and on?
About 14 months, I would say, with large gaps in between. Because of the nature of the story, it takes place partly in winter, partly during the summer. There's a couple different timelines. So just through necessity, we had to sort of break up the shoot.
So it wasn't purposeful. You didn't write something that you knew you'd be able to write or film over an extended, like, segmented period like that?
Well, it made sense to approach it that way because we wouldn't have the means to just sort of do it all in one go. The real challenge after we had the script and we agreed this is what we're going to do was to find actors who are committed enough to stick it out because it was going to be a long shoot for no money. This is the pitch that you have to make, right? You have to sit down with someone you barely know and say, hello, my name is Larry. I've written the screenplay. I've never attempted a feature-length film before in my life. I would like you to consider the part of Kay. There's a little bit of sex and a lot of violence. My name is Larry. Oh, right, no money. No money at all up front.
You just got to hit the stuff that sounds good, like there's a little bit of sex.
Yeah, there's a little bit of sex, a lot of violence. Yeah.
But that might be a way to end up with actors that are really
committed.
Passionate about it, which is probably what happened. I don't know everyone who's in the movie, but I know Matt Burgess is, and having worked with him several times, and having had conversations with him about what he wished was the case for the film industry in this province, and how that wasn't the reality. I'm not at all surprised he ended up in the movie and was willing to do it for no money.
But sacrifices were made on his part to do that, not the least of which, you know, he's no longer in the union. And when we were filming the large part of his dialogue, he was in production at Shakespeare in the Saskatchewan. The man would do a show at Shakespeare in the Saskatchewan, drive out to Harris, almost an hour out of town, shoot all night long, drive home, get his son to school, sleep, get up, go to Shakespeare on the Saskatchewan, do the whole thing again with a smile on his face. that is not an easy thing to find, and like that's our secret weapon right there. And I think that the fact that I've been working in theater and I have all these ties from my drama department days definitely helped. I had resources around me that would help me put the film together relatively cheaply, and I recognize that not everybody has that.
So let's talk a little bit. We sort of just jumped in head first, but
yeah, we did. Sorry.
That's okay. Let's talk a little bit about your beginnings. I almost said humble beginnings for some reason. I don't even know
yes,
why.
Because here I am knocking on the door of 40, and I have hardly a pair of jeans without holes in them. Because I've made it.
Yeah. Well, you have a film under your belt, so it can't be that humble.
Well, we got to wait till we see it, though.
So yeah, tell me a little bit about how you got into this game. Like first of all, on Book of Trespasses, you were, I'm assuming, a writer and a producer.
Yeah. I'm co-directing with Jared Berry, who's my partner. He has Capico Films in town here. They do mainly like advertising and wedding videos up till this point.
But I'm guessing narrative, like this is kind of the reason he got into filmmaking in the first place?
Well, and that's the deal, and that's part of the reason we're able to do it so cheaply. Because he had this apparatus in place that had light and sound equipment and a camera, really. I had sound covered. That was sort of my department. I also podcast, so I was going to sort of dip my beak into that. But getting Jared to agree to help me out with this basically meant we had camera and lights for free. We no longer had to budget renting all of that shit, which made the movie possible, essentially.
It wouldn't have been
well, it would have been possible, but it would have gone back to shooting the dissection at a time and financing in between and just the constant stress.
And never knowing if you were going to be able to finish.
Indeed. And not being able to say this is our end date to our actors, because that was important to me as part of the proposal. This is what we want to shoot, this is when we want to shoot it. If all goes well, you'll start here, you'll finish there.
At least you were able to tell them, and no matter what, there won't be a check. Well, that was a certainty.
I did not say that. I said there will be no immediate check. If there's a pie to be split here, absolutely. Can I say that? Absolutely.
Well, you did, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I will spread the wealth. I am not, I'm not imagining that I'm going to get rich off of this necessarily. The real dream or hope would be that if it got some kind of limited distribution, if it was seen in a few film festivals, that some industry person could watch it and say, really, they made this for like less than, $25,000 for reals? What would happen if we gave these guys a budget?
Yeah,
right?
Which has happened. I mean, that's a reaction that has got people further work, historically in film, in the indie scene. So you started as a playwright in terms of like, was that kind of the main thrust of your you're a storyteller.
My creative history?
Yeah.
I was recognized for nothing in high school did I excel at, except for English and writing. I got a couple of awards for writing and stuff like that. I always loved the drama department, and I was interested in it, but I had a confidence problem. This is, of course, back in the early 90s where it wasn't cool to be a nerd, where you were actually made fun of for, going to...
Being artistic.
Yeah. I always used to baffle me, all the jockey guys are like, art fag or whatever they want to call me.
The two are kind of synonymous.
Yeah, they're going to go run laps after school, and I'm going to go give back rubs to the hottest girls in the school, right? So I'm losing.
People express themselves in different ways.
So I definitely loved theater and had appreciation for it. When I went to the university, I went in as an English major, but got completely swept into the drama department at the
As
U of
often
S.
happens.
And I don't want to talk shit about the U of S or talk down about the U of S, but it was not the most incredible theater program. I mean, the spaces we were using were small, and you could tell that the university did not make that department any kind of priority.
It was inadequate in a lot of ways. Sure.
Every year I went there, the price went up and the quality of education went down. I'm not trying to shame anybody. I'm just saying that as a state of fact. And the best learning I did there was independent, because there was a time, and apparently they don't do this anymore, and hopefully I'm wrong, but you were allowed to put up shows independently. You could rehearse and...
Yeah, that had nothing to do with course credit.
No, you could just do it. And that was my undoing as far as my overall average at university. But I was able to put up several of my own plays.
I saw a few of them.
Little Pleasures, Nevermore, The Happy Thief.
I saw Happy Thief, and I saw Human Ghost Stories.
Yeah, so and then I did a few of them, and some of the people that I used in Book of Trespasses go back to those days, right? So it's always nice to have someone you can pull from the Wayback Machine. But before I got into the writing plays, I was a little bit of an arty-farty poet guy. I think I went into this thing where I thought poetry was cool and was going to get me laid. Did not pan out.
No, it didn't get you laid?
But I have volumes and volumes of really bad angry young man poetry.
Was it because your poetry was bad, or was it because that doesn't hold true about poets?
It's just not true about poets.
Poets just don't get laid?
There is a romanticism that is put to a starving artist poet.
Wouldn't you be a really shitty poet? Like, your passion... you'd write bad poetry if you were getting laid all the time, I
suppose, what we'd be whining about. I would actually have musings on nights when I don't sleep to take all those old poetries and compile them into a book called My Short Life and Long Death as a Poet. But I decided to jump over to the plays, and being able to put them up in these black box theaters, very bare bones production values, using my friends again. Absolutely. But much like making this movie now, in a way it sort of feels like those days working back in the black box. I'm getting paid nothing. Nobody's getting paid anything. Everybody who's there is there because they want to be there and are helping me tell the story. And that's my number one positive memory of school, is doing that independent theater work. I did learn a lot of stuff, and I did meet some cool people, and there were some very high quality teachers there. Again, I don't just want to be this big shaming for the U of S, but I do agree, and I think this is true of most people, especially creative people. I did my best learning independently.
Yeah, I had a similar experience when I was in school at U of S. I did a lot of... I was in a lot of the main stage shows, so it wasn't as much about me putting up my own work, although I did do that a little bit. But the class work itself, I felt its importance to me was very minimal. I wasn't on any kind of scholarship, so I didn't need to maintain any kind of average. I was there for the ability to have the practical application of what I was learning in the class, and just being able to be in plays. That's the only reason anyone's like, I'm going to be an actor. Is because they want to be on a stage, and perform. They don't want to go read books about acting. They want to actually be in front of an audience and do it.
They want the applause.
Yeah, I think there's definitely there's an element of that. We like to convince ourselves that that's not the case, but so you put on some of your own work at U of S.
Yep.
You had work produced elsewhere too, right? Didn't Human Ghost Stories go to Vancouver or something at one point?
There was Human Traffic that we did out in British Columbia. It was part of their festival there. It was put up by Terrace Little Theatre in the way north there. I went up there. It was nice to get an actual paycheck out of a script. That was the first for me. I had a seafood dinner when I got my check, just because I felt like something to do. No, I did not frame it.
The first check I got for writing, I framed, but I didn't frame the actual check. I made it printed, it looks just like the check, and then I put it in a frame. I did a couple of fringe shows. I collaborated on a couple of fringe shows. I sort of, after university dried up, I hitched my wagon to the dinner theater, off-Broadway dinner theater, that was in Saskatoon, and did 4 or 5 seasons of work there. And I didn't do full-length shows of mine, but we did a lot of cabaret, sketch comedy shows, and sort of work for offices. Some office Christmas party wants to have entertainment. I would come in and write an outline for that, and we would do a show for them. So I was still trying to stay in at least one wing in the arts as much as possible, but it was complicated by the fact that I fathered 2 children and was trying to buy a house, and the real world creeps in. You say that anybody who is interested in acting, and I think writing, there's an element of the same too. There's ego to that. But I think in the environment which we're in here in Saskatchewan, it goes past ego to almost a level of delusion. You just keep going and hope that something will stick. That sounds horrible to say it out loud, but it's true. You mean in terms of shooting for the career you want?
If you want to stay in Saskatchewan and get paid to live creatively, you are playing some pretty steep odds. I hate to be that blunt, but that's honestly how I feel. But I do feel that this is my home. This is where I want to be. And until my boys are grown up, I'm not going to be super mobile that I imagine. So whatever art I'm going to do, I'm going to do here. And after many years sort of out of it and working in security and doing jobs that were somewhat soul draining, and finding that the further away from the creative work I got, the less creative I was becoming. My output went way down as far as just writing, even for me. It didn't even matter back in the day if anyone was reading it. I was always writing something. And at some point during my late 20s, that died, and writing became something that I had to
force yourself to do
and actually do it, and it wasn't like the old days where I could stretch out on a mattress and write for 12 hours, right? It was a couple hours here or there. It was starting and stopping in a way that I'm not used to working.
No writer really likes it that way,
and I think it hurts. It makes everything slow down, and it's really hard to get the mojo back if you're stopping and starting. So once I finally got to this place, my wife is a nurse, and she got her degree and she went back to work. I sort of decided, okay, well, I'm going to dial back the work on that I'm doing, and I got to get back into the creative world, because it may not pay anything, but it's what I want to do.
You had stories they needed telling.
I felt like I'd done my time. I sold shoes, I pumped gas, I worked at a telemarketing place. Like, you name a shitty job, I did it. And while I did it, I dreamed of doing something creative. And it's my turn, It's time,
Please.
And I love doing the fringe shows, and I love doing the dinner theater as well. But again, we weren't getting paid seriously for acting there, It was all,
I heard a rumor that the servers would make more than the performers.
It depends on the show. We got a percentage of the ticket that meant pennies per ticket per actor.
But if the show sold, extraordinarily well, then you would get paid.
There were shows that were a
accordingly.
lock. Usually over the Christmas season, the show would sell out consistently. I found the best way to make money was to split the difference, because I waited tables there as well. If I could get a small part where I just showed up for a couple scenes in Act 2, I could still wait tables.
All through Act 1, or what?
Yeah, well,
that's crazy.
We don't do service during the show, right? So we do service, the lights go down, the show starts. It just meant I didn't get the break with the rest of the actors during intermission. I had to
You had to do a super quick warm-up.
Absolutely. Or I just have to run out and serve drinks really quickly. But it was awesome for the tips, because people are, how can you do two things? But you're the waiter, but you were up there, but here, take my money.
Yeah. Oh, man. Do you miss Off-Broadway? Like, it hasn't been around for, 5 years now?
3 or 4, yeah, it's been a while now.
Do you miss not having that outlet?
I miss the stage, and I miss, having the ability to do a show. A lot of the shows that we did there were very broad, door-slamming farces. They're not the type of shows that I would write or typically get excited about, but they're fun.
But they're fun,
you know. And I missed being able to stretch those muscles, and I do think that I became a much better actor in my time at the Off-Broadway than I did at the U of S.
Ooh.
Again, I got thrown in the deep end there. I'm 21 and I'm playing Vershinin in Three Sisters, right? Like, I'm just not ready for it. We did Grapes of Wrath. I'm playing Pa Jode. I'm supposed to be playing this 60-year-old, weather-beaten farmer. And again, I'm 21.
Yeah. Yeah. The William Shatner School of Acting. Learn to act by acting.
I was working through the fear. All of those main stage shows I did, I was more or less terrified throughout them. I got through it, I learned the lines, and I didn't bump into the furniture, but I certainly didn't excel there. With the dinner theater, because the runs that we were doing were so long.
Huge, yeah.
Instead of just doing, 6 shows total, we would run 4 nights a week for a month and a half, right? So you get a little bit of butterflies for the first weekend because you want to make sure that everything's going to work.
Yeah.
But by the end of it,
it's old hats and
we would get really good deals on the food. It would either be $2 a plate there, or if it was like the end of the night and the food was getting thrown out, it would be a free plate of food. And like at Christmas, you're talking mashed potatoes, pierogies, turkey, right? Mm-hmm. And I would be like shoveling this shit in, and then like, Larry, your call's up, and I'd run up on stage practically burping my food, no anxiety at all, like almost to the other extreme, where it wasn't that I didn't give a shit, but it got a little bit careless, right?
Yeah.
Just that single number of shows, it got me comfortable on stage in a way that I'd never been before. Mm-hmm. So, but as far as writing, no, again, I was doing PG level humor. Usually if I'm writing humor, I'm going to go dark and brutal. I want to hurt somebody's feelings. I like kind of angry.
That's just where you go,
humor.
Hey?
Typically that's where I go. I can't tell you the amount of times I wrote a sketch that everybody laughed out loud while they read it and then said, no, we can't do that. It happened a lot.
It's not for our crowd.
Yeah.
So Off-Broadway's now gone.
Yes.
And the film industry in Saskatoon is all but gone.
Unless you're corner gas, it seems.
I suppose.
Yeah, I did apply. We did apply for grants to help us with this film. We did not get any. Well, we applied for 2, so we didn't, I guess, fall over ourselves. But I'm
surprised to hear there are even grants.
Yeah, there's still a few,
available.
But there's very little to spread around. And a big bite of it, make no mistake, did go to corner gas. You want to get financed in Saskatchewan? Produce the most successful television show in Canadian history.
Yeah,
and they'll happily write you a check out of the taxpayers.
I guess we shouldn't be surprised. I heard a rumor that a bunch of the budget for that movie or maybe it was marketing cost or something, came out of like Sask Tourism's.
Well, there's no shortage
budget.
of ugly rumors, but I'd heard there's as much as said if they didn't get the money that they would shoot it in Alberta. And how would that look?
Yeah.
Again,
I wouldn't
that's
put it
all
past
me
them.
talking out of my ass.
But, but I mean, that sounds totally plausible to
yeah.
me. But what I wanted to ask was, with those opportunities that you had in the past drying up, was the decision to write a film, like you said earlier that it started as something else and then became a film?
Yeah.
So was any part of it to do with the fact that there's a greater chance at reaching people with a film than there is with a play, maybe, and also more expectation that there might be a paycheck at the end of the rainbow if things go really well?
I think it's a combination of other things. First of all, I did the short film Charming when the Off-Broadway was still open with a lot of my Off-Broadway people. And I had a good time doing it, and we got to go to the Yorkton Film Festival, and I got to see what the film festival was like. Mm-hmm. It was a nightmare screening. We had a 10-minute comedy film, and we screened right before a 40-minute documentary, and I'm not making this up, about photographers that go to hospitals to take pictures of dying babies so that the family can have something to remember them by. Nobody at that screening has any memory of Charming at all, I'm sure. It's just, I don't know who put those two together, but thanks.
How could that be how could that sustain for 40 minutes?
Oh, God. Yeah, so it was still a cool experience, and I was overall happy considering it was our first at-bat. Mm-hmm. And so that sort of put the film thing in my head a little bit as a more real thing that I could actually consider doing. But I'm much more comfortable on the stage because I have much more experience in it. Mm-hmm. And I do think that my writing favors the stage, at least where my strengths were. I mean, I'm trying to sort of narrow it down.
Is that because that's how you view it when you're writing? Like the immediacy of the stage? or...
The fact that Birdman just won Best Picture notwithstanding, typically in a motion picture, a scene that goes on for 6 to 10 minutes that's just dialogue doesn't happen unless you're Quentin Tarantino. Mm-hmm. It's all about, especially in television these days, is getting to the meat of it as efficiently as possible with as few lines as possible. Your quicker cuts. In a stage, you can sit there and you can say a 4-page speech, and the audience will sit there and take it. On film, they won't. Right? I tend to sort of let the character beats out. Let us get to know the character for the things they say, as opposed to just telling you this is what they're about. Right? Mm-hmm. And I tend to write long, and that's much better for the stage than it is for film as a rule. Are there exceptions to that? Absolutely, but as a rule, especially in this genre, as we were shooting Book of Trespasses, we're telling ourselves we're shooting a horror movie, and as we're cutting Book of Trespasses, we're telling ourselves this is kind of a supernatural thriller, right? Some of the scenes, and we're going to be doing editing, we're going to be cutting it back and trying to sort of get it as efficient as possible. I think that they're good scenes on the page, and I can see them on the stage. But when you get to the film format, when it's a couple of floating heads talking to each other, and you got wide shot, close up, wide shot, close up, it's death. The movie stops.
Yeah.
You either need like amazing fucking dialogue or you have to be trying something ambitious, which Birdman did, right? Mm-hmm. But that's the exception to the rule. People tend to like, especially with the genre movies, which we're trying to go, something that will tell them a story that scares them fairly quickly and efficiently. I feel the same way about the sort of horror genre as I do about comedy. If you're going to go over 90 or 100 minutes, you got to earn it. I think you want to sort of get in and get out.
Yeah, nobody likes a long comedy.
And that's a discipline that I had to teach myself. So going back to the question you asked 5 minutes ago, why I decided to turn this at the time play into a movie was I'd lost my stage. The Off-Broadway was gone, and I didn't know when or if the next stage was going to be coming.
So it was primarily just the practicality of it? You thought it was more producible as a film?
My original thought was to meet in the middle. This would be my transition from stage to film, right? I would write it as a play, and I would stage it as a play, but I would film it cinematically, and basically teach myself to edit. It'll be unabashedly a play. It'll be unabashedly a stage. It'll be unabashedly black box. But I will shoot it and cut it and edit it like a movie. And while I do that, I will tell my story, show my story to people, and teach myself how to piece a film together.
So you were like checking things off a list of like, I'd like to learn how to do this. I'd like to be able to show people this, and doing this would deliver on all those things.
Yeah, it's the middle version, because whenever you film a play, you filmed Happy Thief for me,
Yeah.
You typically got a camera at the back of the room, and you can hear the audience shuffling and coughing, and it's one static shot of the stage, and it's punishing to watch unless it's your best friend on stage, right?
Yeah.
So instead of doing that, just lose the audience, shoot the play on the stage, but shoot it like a film.
Like the BBC does frequently.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And mainly as an exercise, and if it gets my story out there and people see the story, great, I will be further ahead along. But the more I wrote this, and the more, originally it was like campfire stories, people around the campfire sort of taking their turns telling stories, and it would be like a staged anthology. But my first story, which was called Bullies, which turned into Book of Trespasses, became way too big for an anthology. So all of a sudden, it was just this.
So you recognize this will, like, what I need to do is just write this as a movie. It's not going to function otherwise.
Yeah. The other big benefit was knowing that I had a few people already around me that were looking for another thing to do, and I was their writer friend guy. So if I would show them something, and I think if it was halfway good, I had a chance of them saying, well, let's take a crack at this, right? There was a lot of people out there, and this is strange to me, because I'm a writer, I guess, but that their hearts seem willing. I want to make a movie, I just don't know what to make.
That was going to be my next question was, I would think it would be hugely daunting at this point in Saskatchewan's, the history of film here, to now just decide I'm going to make a full-length feature. Especially something like this. I mean, I don't know a whole lot about it. I haven't seen the film because it's not available yet. But just from what I've heard from you and from other people I know who are involved in having seen the trailer, it looks like a pretty high-quality piece of work.
Yeah.
So I just feel like it must have been a really daunting decision to make, to say, I'm going to dive in and do this. Was it the fact that you didn't encounter a whole lot of resistance, or was it that you had people who immediately said, yeah, I'll jump on board?
Yes and no to answer that question, because I had people who were absolutely willing to make a film and wanting to help me and willing to volunteer, and I had a creative partner I'm not going to name here, but that I met with regularly. We'd go and have a beer and talk about what it would be like when we made this movie and how we would approach certain scenes. The problem was a year went by and that's all we were doing. And enter Jared Berry. Back when my off-Broadway days, he's just a teenager who sort of was a hangabout at the theater. And I was doing a zombie-themed fringe play, and I needed a kid to be our whipping boy for Creeping Zombie Insanity. This was a crazy project. From writing to stage, it was like less than 3 months from concept to execution on this play, right? It was just a dead run the whole time, which was part of what was fun about it. Anyway, I asked Jared to help me out with that play, and he said that he would do it if in exchange I would help him with his zombie movie. Now, at the time, he's like 16, 17 years old, and to be honest, I was like, yeah, absolutely, Jared, I will help you with your movie. But I had no belief that this would come to be. Fast forward a year later, and I'm running around with a t-shirt and a lightning bolt on it, killing zombies for Jared. and this is before Jared had gone to school and studied photography and studied film. This was like a super rough indie project. But what impressed me about Jared, to be honest, was not the finished product of Flatline, but the fact that he was a teenager. He said he was going to make a movie, and he did it. So fast forward again years later, and Jared comes in with this offer, basically, yeah, I will help you make this movie, but I want to I want to have my creative voice sway. He's going to co-direct. He's going to run the camera. I'm going to talk. I'm going to work with the actors. I'll be in charge of story. He'll be in charge of.
You had
visual.
like a Doug Liman, John Favreau type, like swingers arrangement.
Yeah, I'll work the story. He'll work the camera. It was basically. I mean, we did. There was crossover, but basically that was the concept, which made sense because Jared knew how to run the camera.
Yeah, and had one.
That we could use for free, because before this we were thinking of renting it. But I had people who were originally involved with that who said, no, we can't do that.
Yeah.
And I lost friends over it. Before the movie started shooting, it had cost me, because I was not in a position to say no to that offer. It was a fair offer. It was an unbelievably generous offer, and it was a way, instead of to get from talking about the movie to actually making it. And so I couldn't say no to it, so I didn't. And I fully believe that if I didn't, I'd still be in pre-production today.
Yeah.
A lot of things fell into place, and I'm not, like, it sounds like I'm such a whiner. And I realize I'm really lucky that I happen to have this circle of friends who are very supportive. Like, I did not make this movie by myself, and would never suggest such. You can't. Anybody who says that you can make a movie by yourself, I just...
Well, the difference is, I mean, lots of people, I think they're right when people say you can make a movie on your phone. You know, anyone can make a movie. It's just the majority of them will be shitty. I made a movie when I was
talking.
Yeah. I tried to make a feature-length film when I was in my early 20s that I wrote and directed, and you know, I had like student actors that I worked with that were in it, and a couple filmmaker friends along the lines of what you're describing with Jared, who, you know, had some filming expertise, and people would come in and sort of switch off and that kind of thing. But I tried to do it all myself, basically, wear too many hats, and it just didn't go anywhere good. We shot a film, it was just garbage, because not everyone's movie is going to be good, you know, like...
Well, I think that doing a couple passes and having my experience with both the short and Jared's first attempt at a feature sort of helped me sort of be a little bit more prepared to what a large task it was. You shouldn't kid yourself going into it. The size of it is mammoth, right? And I wonder if I knew how mammoth and what the cost would be. You know, would I have still pressed on? Probably yes. But I don't know.
So did that factor into you filming in like a chunk here and then a month goes by, or was it...
That was always part of the plan. I never imagined that I would be able to raise enough money or have enough money at one time to do it all in a chunk, which was helpful in splitting. The story was set up in two different timelines. A person is, you know, being told a story that happened 3 years that's going to explain why this terrible thing is happening to him. Very basic plot is that this kid is being held hostage by his boss at a Bible camp. His boss has tied him to a chair and is beating the shit out of him. And he wants to know why. And his boss tells him the story. And the story happens 3 years before anything else. So right there we have the two timelines to split. And we also have one scene that's sort of randomly interjected that actually happens in the wintertime. It's sort of standalone sequence. But I always knew those three pieces would be three separate lengths of shooting that would happen in three different time periods. That would give us downtime in between to both lick our wounds and recuperate, and if necessary raise the funds, collect the props, secure the locations. It was just the practical way to do it, and that was part of the plan from the writing stage once I was decided this was a film. Doing it all in one stretch, if I have no money, unrealistic.
So did you consider that at one point? Like, did you guys, when you finally said, from the point you said, this is happening, I'm doing this film, did you at least attempt that idea in the planning stage and say, now this is what the production timeline would look like if we shot this all in, say, like 2.5 weeks or something? I quit my job and we filmed for 3 weeks, and then there's another so and so months of like prolonged post-production that I can eke out however I see fit. Like, was that even an option, or did you just nix that right from the jump?
I don't think it was never really looked at too seriously. I don't think, not that I remember. I'd have to talk to Gareth and Jared about all of the stuff that has started. Basically, we shot August and September 2013, and then we shot a length chunk right around Christmas and New Year's from 2013 to 2014, and the rest of it was shot throughout last summer.
Yeah, you did like pickups and stuff, right?
Yeah, well, and another whole timeline was covered there. That's where we covered a lot of the really ugly, violent prosthetic and the burns and the different...
You got to leave the violence till last in case you horribly scar one of your lead actors. One of your unpaid lead actors.
Yeah. But it's funny, like, again, going back to me talking about, I thought I was writing something that we could do cheaply. You know, it's set at in a forest and at a camp and in houses and a couple of different hospitals. That was very problematic, that I had two distinct institutions that we had to differentiate. But just having that many locations from a production standpoint complicated things immensely. Whereas if you can, get that sweet one-room thriller script, which is what you're really looking for, if you can write a screenplay that takes place all in one house, that you have
that sustains
a story, that holds it, that they're locked in the house overnight, they're ghost hunting or whatever, and they're in this one location overnight. From a production standpoint, your budget and your production is going to be helped immeasurably, and that's a reality of super low budget filmmaking. I didn't paint myself into that box, but if I was to roll up my sleeves now and say, Larry's going to sit down and write a film that I can make for no money in Saskatoon, that's probably where I would go. I would try to find a location, and that goes right back to my play background too. I have the Human Ghost Stories is set entirely in a bar. So if I want to do a film version of Human Ghost Stories, that's workable. I mean, a bar set's not easy to come across, but once you've built that bar set and you have that bar set, you can shoot your movie there. And from a filmmaking standpoint, and from the headaches that we had in production shooting in the dead of night, and if you could shoot the whole thing in a soundstage, of course, that's ideal. But I have learned so much. Like, there's nowhere you can be in Saskatchewan where you can't hear the highway somewhere on the mic. We always plan when we're shooting night shoots, you got 8 hours of night. Well, you know what? In July and August, you got maybe 5, 6 best, right? So it's
5 before the light starts looking markedly different from what it's been all through the night.
One of the truest cliches I came across actually reading about before we started production was prepare yourself for the 3 movies that you're about to make. The movie that you write, the movie that you shoot, and the movie that you cut. So I have not found anything that is more true than that I have read so far about film.
So when you were, you already implied that when you were filming a horror, and now you're editing a supernatural thriller.
Yeah.
So what were you writing?
I think when I was writing it, this was a scary movie, we really spend time on the characters. You really get to know Duncan Stewart, the main character, so that if nothing else, if no one else's behavior makes sense in the movie, you know that guy, right? And that sort of takes time. When we first meet him, he's drunk and he's belligerent and he's beating the shit out of a kid. And then we could go to his backstory, and he's this sad sack, pathetic guy who doesn't look like he could hurt
a fly.
And we learn what led to that transformation. And that character arc is more traditional what you're going to see in a drama or a thriller than you're going to see in a typical horror movie. It's not Friday the 13th, it's not Evil Dead, but I'd like to think that fans of both of those movies could enjoy this. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's going to take its time a little bit, and it's going to be more of a character piece than it is slam bam action. And that is, if it's a weakness of my writing and my script. But I think that that makes it unique too, in a way. The fact that there is enough to keep you interested. There's violence happening. Like we do the Shakespearean concept to try and make sure that we keep the people who are there for the tits and the blood get paid off early in the script, right? If we're not going to give them the full meal right away, we'll give them the promise of something right away to keep them watching. And I think it's sort of how the story is told that's going to make it interesting.
So that was all writing phase,
that's
though, right?
Yes.
So then what was different in the filming stage? Like, was there actually a moment you reached where you thought to yourself, we can't shoot what I envisioned while writing? Therefore it had to change, or was it a more organic, gradual thing? I'm curious how you get from the idea, and because I've written plays myself, and you sort of know that it's not going to end up what you envision while you're writing, but that doesn't, because you don't know what it's going to end up as, it doesn't really affect how you write. At least it doesn't for me. So I'm curious how you get to such a different thing, once the editing process is done.
This is going to be a convoluted way to answer that, but here it is. There's a centerpiece scene in this movie, which happens around a campfire, which is originally going to be where the whole shebang of this was going to take place, like on a stage with a campfire or a fake fire. Mm-hmm. But terrible things have happened, and we've had a moment of calm. And our two main characters sit across from this fire, and they talk to each other. I believe as scripted, it's 9 pages. And on the page, and in my mind, it sustains beautifully. But again, when you get to that, on the day when you're shooting it, and it's the middle of the night, and you're racing against the sun coming up, you realize, what is the essential...
What's the core?
What is the essential things that we need to do here? How many times do I kind of narratively repeat myself? Somebody says something negative about a person and then gives a couple of examples to back it up. Well, do you need those 2 examples, right? And on the page, I felt like I needed them because they were there till the day we shot. But there were a few scenes that as we shot them, I was saying to myself, this isn't going to be in the final cut. And the other thing is storyboarding, which we did quite a lot. I would say about 90%-ish of what we shot was storyboarded. So
storyboarded quite intensely, really.
That I had roughly in my head. If I had a good clear image in my head, I would try to draw it on the page. I'm a horrible artist.
Yeah,
I think I will. You've seen some of my storyboards; they're hilarious. But it's enough for Jared to understand what the hell I'm trying to talk about. But then you get to the editing phase. We would do those storyboards. That would be our start point. We make sure we got those covered, and then if we want to try a few more angles after those are covered, do whatever we want with the time allotted, right? But if we do the storyboards, we know we have that. So yeah, there was a few scenes, but definitely that big centerpiece scene, which was sort of the moment where I felt everything will stop and everybody can rest and take a breath before the fit hits the shan again, right? But that rest really needed to be probably 2 or 3 beats, not
9.
Not 9. And for some reason, I just didn't see it till we were on the set.
It's a really common thing. I heard a great story once about the scene in The Fugitive where Harrison Ford is he gets to it's right before he jumps off the dam or whatever, right. And when Tommy Lee Jones' character finds him and confronts him, in the script they each had there's about 2 pages of dialogue there,
an exchange
before the exact same thing happens. Right. And then on the day and nothing had been spoken of about it being poor dialogue or anything like that. I think it was as simple as on the day, Harrison Ford was maybe really cold in the water on set, and he's like, "This is a shitty place to be filming." And he said, "Really, all of this is just me saying I didn't kill my wife, and him saying I don't care.
Yeah,
that's all it has to be." And the director, I forget the director's name, but he's somebody who was like, well, I'm not arguing with Harrison Ford. So he's like, all right, let's film that.
It works.
Yeah, and the efficiency is great. And the scene probably, who knows, but the scene probably plays better that way.
And I do think that's the discipline of film, and especially I think television is really, really bearing that back. You can breathe, stretch more. It's a little bit more literary, I guess. It's closer to novel writing on stage than it is to screen. And if you want to sit down and write a novel, that's fine. But this is me. You can't get every precious detail out, and the writerly instinct is to want that. And I do find that there were certain things, and again, maybe it wouldn't be the case on the next project, that once I found myself on the day, I would hear the line and say, "We really don't need that. I thought I'd locked down the script, but apparently I hadn't. I don't need that line." And then again in editing, we have our storyboards and we start there, but it sort of comes on which is the better shot, and can we see equipment in that shot? Oh, we can. So I guess we're not using that shot.
Oh, there's got to be one in every film. You got to have your boom mic sneak in. At least one, yeah. If it's going to be a good horror movie.
Yeah. And stuff you just learn to live with. We talk about continuity all the time in the editing room. There's continuity stuff that's well, there's not much we can do about that. And there's continuity stuff that somebody might notice that. But if they notice that, to hell with them, right?
Yeah, well, especially when there's not really anything you can do about it.
There's a scene, I believe, where Matt's doing a doodle, and during the wide shot and to the close-ups, he's holding a blue pen to a red pen.
And then back to blue?
And just in the wide shot, it's a blue, and in the close-ups, it's a red for some reason. And it's just like, we're not reshooting that. We're not reshooting that. Like, that set has been torn down. Like, that place doesn't exist
You could
anymore.
probably find somebody for a couple $1,000s to digitally change the pen, but...
Yeah, no. But that's the stuff we're talking about in post-production. I have a shot that seems simple. Person gets out of a tent, looks to her right, and in the distance she sees smoke rising in the horizon. And we tried to get that shot, but it was like, it was Saskatchewan prairies, right? You light a fire and it just goes straight away.
Yeah.
It just flies away. You need to find an absolutely perfectly pristine, still day, and then douse some wet leaves over a bonfire to maybe get what we were getting at. And never got it, and we still haven't solved that 100% if we're going to have to, like, digitally add smoke. We have the shot without smoke, essentially, is what we have right now.
And it doesn't play without smoke, eh? It just doesn't achieve what's required of the moment.
Because it makes sense that's why she would go in that direction, right? It's just a weird story beat that you have to live with. But again, going back to the story you write, the story you shoot, and the story you edit, absolutely. The movie is made to a large extent in the editing room. Make no mistake.
Yeah.
The only thing that the days that you're shooting are the high pressure for is that you can work with the materials you have. You cannot work with the materials you don't
have.
It's the shots that you want to have but don't. We need to cut to an exterior of the car right now, and we don't have that shot. So we're staying in the car.
Do you think that this will, if you go on and write hopefully more films down the line, is this going to inform your writing? Like, can you take something away from this along the lines of, are you going to write more in imagery now as a result, or how is it going to affect your...
I think I will write more efficiently for the film just because I have more experience at it now. And there's one thing to sort of respect my voice. That sounds already and pretentious or whatever, but I tend to write long. I tend to do that, and that's my instinct. My first draft will be ridiculous, and I will just pare back.
That's most writers, I think.
Yeah, and like most writers, they're their own worst editors. That's why writers need to find an editor that they really respect, someone who's okay with telling them the blunt truth about shit, because you can't tell it to yourself, right? I noticed that with the actors too. The Jared calls it, there's just the Larry turn of phrase. It sounds okay coming out of my mouth. He can imagine me saying it, but for some reason the actors will have to move a couple words around just to make it make sense to them. And I'm not precious about it typically on the day. If there's a line that I'm like, yeah, you're off there and we need this to be right, then I will definitely hit that. But I haven't been precious about word perfect, and I've certainly not been a strict. There's no diva mentality ever anywhere on our set.
Well, that's something you can probably have confidence in too. Like if you have people, again, like you've described, that you have primarily because they're passionate, because they wouldn't be doing it if they weren't, then you could probably, I would think, have more trust in them, that little choices like that they feel the need to make aren't coming from a place other than logic, like if there's a logic in it for them that's actually worthwhile.
And if anybody has that weak moment on the set where they say, look, I'm not getting paid for this, well,
did that happen?
Nobody's getting paid for this. I'm sure it did, but I'm not going to point fingers at anybody. I have nothing but love for everybody involved in this. Yeah. There were some hard days. I had one day in particular, I never imagined I would leave set while we were shooting. I would never imagine it, but it was like the third or fourth night of night shooting, and I was like feverish. I couldn't keep a thought in my head. Like I was just a liability. So that last hour, that last night, I said, I'm going to go pack up the goods and try not to fall over. I'm sorry. Jared, finish this for me. And I feel shame saying that now. Looking back on it, so just power through for another hour, Parsons. But at the time, I honestly couldn't form clear thoughts in my head. Like, it was bad. It was bad. And there were a few low moments, frustrating moments on set. But at no point could you say, shut up, take this seriously. You're ruining the fucking take, right? Because everybody is volunteering their time, and so much hard work and energy has been put into it that no, we're not going to do there. I'm sure there were days where we were sick of each other and we were happy to go our separate ways at the end of the day, but I don't remember any real tension on set. There were days that we were nervous about because we weren't sure if we were going to be able to accomplish what we needed in the time we had, or when the fire is not working right and we have to have an actual official person there for the day we're doing the burns, to make sure everything was safe and nobody was getting killed. So we had to shoot it that day. She was booked for that day. Here she was. So the sky's not matching what we shot yesterday at all, but
so what? Yep.
Right?
Keep it tight on the fire.
Indeed. We're burning today. God. But just like, again, going back to doing those plays, learning how to put up a stage play by myself. Quite dangerously, I'm sure, hanging lights and moving lights in the North Studio by myself
all
at
alone,
3 a.m. Everything you're not supposed to do.
Yeah, there's a reason that they don't let students do that anymore.
That's probably exactly why. There's liability issues. Somebody drops a light or drops themselves. And why was there not a professor there?
Well, and I mean, those issues always existed, but I think at some point some administrator changed, a job was filled that it wasn't that way before, and then I think it was just like party time's over, and they just kiboshed it all.
Those spaces will just stay empty. I remember we tried to put up a show with a bunch of the graduates from the department, and we asked if we could use the space to record. And this was within a few months of us graduating the program. And we were basically saying, no, we would rather they stood empty. What if you broke a window?
Yeah, it doesn't make much sense to me.
Once that semester was over and they got our money,
to hell with you from this point.
Well, even if they would we offered to rent it to you, but no, it's just going to stay empty. Those rehearsal spaces will lie dormant because we can't be bothered to rent them out. It just boggles my mind.
I wonder what's involved with renting them out that's so troublesome.
University administration, I'm sure. The
paper shuffle is intense to some degree, because there's I don't think there's no reason. There must be something inconvenient for somebody, or just maybe it's just a matter of the work that they have to do that they wouldn't have to do if these spaces are empty.
Well, it
seems completely the opposite energy and intention of what everybody involved in this film would have had. Is people recognizing what the realities of the project are going to be, but then making the conscious decision to do it anyway. And somebody who works at the University of Saskatchewan in the drama department, I feel like should be able to see those same realities and make the same conscious choice. Yes, it's going to be more work, but
somebody has to
why would I be in this job if it doesn't? If I don't seize the opportunity to help ex-students or current students or anyone who wants to use our facilities.
Yeah. Well, and that's not just the university. I find it frustrating. I have a friend who's really actively trying to find a good theater space to use, and they're either appallingly expensive, or there are spaces like the university or Castle Theatre at Aidan Bowman there.
Yeah.
That is a beautiful theater. And it is not used for anything because
the
rent is ridiculous. Punishingly so. You cannot make a profit in that space. So here we have this gorgeous theater that is used for school assemblies.
Yeah, it just sits there empty. And I don't know what it's like now, but when I looked into it years ago as an option for producing, there was the people involved in the rental. It was their goal was to make it stay unrented.
Yeah.
They had some kind of personal stake in it being empty.
I
can't imagine what that stake is. But why? I found for weeks afterwards, I would run through in my mind there's got to be reasons, because what could this person be gaining personally, by making sure that people don't get to use their theater?
Yeah.
There's got to be something. What does a person get out of that?
I wish I could tell you. I do not have all.
I never found an answer. I never was able, and nobody I know who's worked there or has tried to work there has been able to come up with an answer either.
But the Manhattan Ballroom, people have tried to make a go of that space a few times, which is great if you want people to drive 30 minutes of highway before they drink their wine and watch the show and then drive back. And the whole room has got pillars
everywhere.
that sort of
that's no
bisect
good.
everything. There's no good sight lines. Like, I wish that we had another, space other than obviously Persephone, which has some beautiful spaces, but they're actually in use, so I will give them a pass, right? There isn't a lot of options to affordably rent theater space in town, so that's another one of the hurts of the Off-Broadway shuttering its doors. Like I said, I lost my stage. I always found it easier to write when I could imagine the stage I was putting the play up on.
Totally, yeah. If it feels, as soon as I have a production date,
Yeah.
like for when it's going up, my output like triples. And my good pages don't triple, but like just getting the shit out of the way immediately increases.
If I know I'm doing a show in the North Studio with black boxes and whatnot, I can sort of see in my head, as I'm writing, how it's going to look already. And that just gives an ease. Whereas before that, when it's just some nebulous space, any theater space,
Yeah.
you can imagine,
Or you find yourself being like, or is this even a play?
Yeah.
Maybe this is a book.
Exactly.
Maybe this is a movie.
Yeah.
It could be anything at this point. It can be dangerous to spend too much time in the heart part of writing rather than the head part of writing, I find. Like, I've literally spent years before in the hard part of writing just because I could, because there was no boundaries being placed on it.
And you don't need any detail. Like, you don't need every detail. One of the characters in my play, I can tell you, it's never come out in the script at all. But I know for a fact, from my personal exploration in writing, that people were so scared of him that they wouldn't trick or treat at his house when they were kids, right? But I'm not going to work that detail into the script, but it's in my brain. And
So
at some point I made that note, at some point, it's real to me, right?
It informed the rest.
It
of the
informs
people.
the rest.
Yeah.
But you don't need that detail,
So it sounds like overall, the process of making the film gave you a sense of the essentials that you didn't have before. Would you say that's true?
Well, it was a crash course. That's how you do it. I learned by doing, like I said. This was my first attempt at directing a feature-length movie, and I learned as I went. And I think that the movie will look good, and I owe that almost entirely to Jared. And the production values and the props are going to be good, and I owe a lot of that to my friend Gareth, who put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it. So at the end, my contribution, other than the original screenplay, what I was learning was, this is what a stage play looks like, this is what a film looks like, and this is the film that I've made in the middle. And I'm going to bear it down, and it is going to be a very watchable film. I'm not trying to talk people out of my movie here. It's not like I'm shit-talking my own work here. I think it's unique, and I think
How writerly of you.
it's an interesting story, well told. I'm the backtracking, pulling my foot out of my mouth, but it's mine. It will definitely be, a Larry Parsons joint, as it were. Spike Lee puts his stamp on it. This is, I think, a fairly accurate assessment of where I'm at right now as far as my screenwriting. And will the next one be better? I hope so. I think it'll be different. I think that I would definitely make a point of telling a faster paced story and go into that knowing, I think that film wants the pace to be faster than stage as a rule. Again, Birdman just won Best Picture, so my head could be far up my ass. But
Did you find Birdman to be a slow-moving film?
not at all. But by typical movie standards, it is. There's that. It seems like that movie.
Typical movie standards of today.
Yeah,
That's the
true.
thing. It's a bit of, I was going to say it's like a holdover. It's not in any way a holdover from the past, but pacing-wise, that's not very indicative of where movies are today. That's something that's changed as a result of the people consuming the movies and what's being catered to.
Birdman felt like, a dozen or so scenes all shot in one elaborate piece at a time. And it was as much the flourish and the style as it was sort of they're talking about similar things that we're talking about, sort of the meat and potatoes of the work of putting on, in this case, a play. But I think that whereas I sort of shy away when I start sounding like an art wank, I think that the Birdman really embraces that.
The whole movie's about the art
exactly,
wank.
like the Edward Norton character is like a complete asshole, and yet everything he does is in service of the play. So it's interesting. I didn't think we had. Well, maybe I was the complete asshole on this set. Who knows? What's the saying? If you encounter one asshole in a day, then you met an asshole. If you encounter 12, you're the asshole. Right?
I've never heard that, but Very true.
Right?
You don't have to convince me. Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm very proud of the footage that's come out of this. I'm still trying to recover from me talking about this movie being slow-paced or whatever, but I'm very happy with the images that we got, and for the amount of money that we put into it. It looks amazing.
Yeah, that was honestly what struck me the most intensely about it, I guess, when I watched the trailer. I was like, I mean, not to exaggerate too much, but my jaw actually did drop a little bit, because the idea of a group of first-time filmmakers just kind of like all coming together for the reasons that you guys did, because you had a shared interest, shared passion, and not really any kind of means to do it in a different way. Like, this is what was available. This is, you had to just like learn as you go and do the best you could, right?
Yeah.
Usually that doesn't net the kind of footage that I saw in the trailer. You know, it's a different feeling movie when you see the trailer, and this looks
and I think that
a couple levels above that.
The production values are good, and that's going to help us a lot. I think that whether or not you like the story when you watch the movie, I can't predict. I've seen the footage so many times. I have no real place to stand. I don't know anymore. I just don't know. But whether or not you like the story, I can confidently say you will say that's well shot, and that, you know, there's some really good acting in it. Mm-hmm. And I'm not even worried about saying that. You know, you'll connect with the story, or you won't, and that's the truth of any movie. To get positive about it, because I've sounded super fucking negative this whole time.
Yeah, sell me on this movie a little bit.
Well, this isn't selling the movie. This is just a general truth. Maybe this is why I like to think of it as a horror movie and not a supernatural thriller. But the history of horror movies, it happens fairly, maybe once or twice every decade. A group of friends will get together and make a movie with the bare means they have available, and they will just somehow pull it out, and somehow it will get distribution. It happens with classic horror movies. Night of the Living Dead is in that category. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is in that category. The Blair Witch Project is in that category. The Paranormal Activity is in that category.
The first one, anyway.
Yeah, the first one. These are just friends saying, how can we make a movie cheaply? And using the parameters of the box that we're in, how can we make this movie as effective as possible within the parameters of this box? Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to say that I expect to be as successful as those films, but it's not unprecedented. Mm-hmm. You know, every now and then a little horror movie that comes along. I mean, get back to the realistic. How many independent horror movies are released every year?
Yeah,
we're another fish in a big ocean of movies, but I'm proud of the product, and I think that if you're into movies and arts and anything in Saskatchewan, well, first of all, you should just support it out of just that. Out of
it exists.
It
there's
exists,
not a lot
so
of
you should support it. But
yeah.
I think you won't have to know me to like the film. You know, I think that if you like that genre, you will like the movie. That's the goal. How can I not say that? I didn't set out to make a movie that people aren't going to like. You know, I like it, and I hope other people do.
I think it might be that simple, honestly. I mean, I think one of the biggest traps you can fall into when you're creating, telling any story, is letting too much of your brain be about who it's going to appeal to or why it's going to appeal to them, rather than just focusing on something that's interesting to you.
What will they think of this?
Yeah. I mean, you run the risk you have to accept is that nobody might be interested in it. You might be a person with tastes that are so niche that literally nobody gives a shit about your story. That's a risk.
Yeah.
But if you can accept that risk at the outset, I think your chances of telling a story that's worth seeing go up immeasurably compared to if you were just like, now who can I get to come watch this, you know? Which I think happens too often. Well, is there anything else you want to... We've been talking for about an hour. Is there anything else you kind of want to sell the audience on?
Well, I hope I didn't come across as this total negative creep or whatever. I mean, I have to have optimism because I did this.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't think you could do this without being an optimist to some degree.
It's the same thing you're talking about actors. You know, nobody... being an actor is basically yelling to the world, like me, like me. And I think that...
And having them yell back, no, no.
Well, they want to yell back no as much as they want to yell back yes. That's the really scary part. The writer is that, except for I find that the writers are a little bit more gentle flowers, right? Like... my personal experience, we did a couple of shows after I'd graduated university. I actually did get the space for a couple of shows, and I got 3 reviews. I got PS Magazine just utterly blew me, just loved the show. And the Sheaf based, I remember the quote was like
which play was this?
I believe this was Human Ghost Stories. And
that was the first
second time we did The Happy Thief. And it was twinned with, I think, the Human Ghost Stories that time. We basically redid them after, and Sky and Josh were involved. But, so we got these 2 glorious reviews from those 2 papers. And then Cam Fuller took a wet hot shit all over me. Like, it was brutal. It was a personal attack, basically.
Oh, no.
And it was like, I didn't like this play because it was written badly, was basically the thesis of it. I remember it very well because it completely made me forget those other 2 positive reviews. And it shared the same... lifestyle section where he gave a positive review to the fucking Glimmer Man. A Steven Seagal.
Steven Seagal and Keenan Ivory Wayans?
Correct. You know, in that review he was like, you know, if you're into this sort of thing, it is what it is, enjoy. But when it came to this play that I poured my heart and soul into, this guy, I don't know why these talented actors would pick this incompetent guy to do. And it hurt me, and truth be told, until Book of Trespasses, I didn't work with those people again. I was in dinner theater licking my wounds, right? I remember the bad review, and I live with the bad review, and I think that's the writerly impulse. You'll always believe the negative review, and
or it's at least it's a struggle to not place more.
But to go full circle to where I started with this, I still have the optimism because for some reason, in spite of the government of Saskatchewan standing against me, and in spite of me, you know, I may starve and have holes in my clothes, but my boys are fed. I definitely want that clear and said that I am responsible for my family. But I still press forward, and if nothing comes of Book of Trespasses, it might not be right away, it might not be a year from now, but there will be another project.
Just don't know. That was going to be my next question, is what's next? I mean, you got to finish editing Book of Trespasses, you got to do the whole festival circuit, I'm assuming, hopefully. By circuit, I mean like the 3 festivals that you can maybe get into that are nearby, that kind of thing.
We're basically in post-production this year.
So knowing that that's the turnaround for a project like this, I mean, even if your next project, assuming will be a smoother process, how does that affect like going into the next thing? Just knowing like the enormous timeline that you're dealing with from conception to people seeing it. Again,
going to my optimism in spite of the words you're hearing, I guess in my head the next time around we would go in with a budget, and we would go in with a very real plot and a crew. You know, basically we had 3 guys and our cast, and then whoever else we could get to volunteer on a given day. But those people would be different on every day. We'd start from 0 with them, you know. I guess in my head the next movie would be well financed. I have this idea. I've even started writing a few scenes of it. Sort of, it's a marriage in my head. If I was a cigar chomping studio producer, I would pitch it like it's Waiting for Guffman meets From Dusk Till Dawn.
And then people would hand you money.
Yeah, give me my money.
Yeah.
Basically, my idea was like a theater troupe that gets hired for a gig, and basically they're the entertainment and the meal, right? So then I get to basically relive my dinner theater days and all the sort of fun / lame sketch comedy that we did, and marry it with sort of a more vibrant action horror sort of environment. But that would require money, and I know that. So if I had money, maybe that would be my next project. But if not, I'm sure it would probably be either a one-room type of thriller. Again, if I can find a location and work a story around that, I think I would do that, or I could even backtrack and go back to my original idea and either write a new play or take one of my old plays and put it up in a good space like Castle Theatre and film it.
So that kind of leads into my next question, which was what advice, if any, would you give to filmmakers like yourself who are really just jumping in because you got to start somewhere, you know? Would it be along the lines of like take into account what's going to be doable, like take advantage of the choices you can make before you're into the project. Because once you're filming a script, the choices become between, like, paring down and saying, what do we really need here? Which is a much narrower field to choose from.
Yeah.
But before you start production, it's kind of like the world's your oyster. You can say from the outset, I want to do this story, but it costs money, as you said.
Yeah.
So I'll just do a whole other story. Is that kind of the most useful choice that a filmmaker can make?
There's a lot to be said for doing an ambitious story on a small budget, but just be real. If you can't make Independence Day, don't make Independence Day, right? Yeah. I reviewed on my podcast Jason Takes Manhattan, the immortal classic. But there's like 2 scenes that was actually shot in New York, and there's 10 minutes of the movie that takes place in New York. And my position is that if you can't do your concept with the budget allotted, then don't do it.
Do a different concept, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Book of Trespasses will be better than Jason Takes Manhattan. Guaranteed. High praise indeed. Mm-hmm. Okay, as far as the advice before you go into it, and again, here I go down to the negatives again, but I'm going to be real. I'm going to be like right-wing John Gormley radio real. Get out of Saskatchewan.
Yeah, well, as so many people who were living and working here have done.
The few actual professional companies that were here are gone because they have a brain in their head. Like Fargo was shot in Calgary. It might well have been shot in Saskatoon, the Fargo TV series, because it's actually closer to Minnesota and the environments are right and probably as cheaper than shooting in Calgary.
Yeah,
there's plenty of productions that I'm sure we lost with that credit, and I don't think anybody could seriously argue that point. And the fact that we don't have the professional industry people in there means basically you are limited to the means you have available, the friends and the people that you can make connections with that are still in the province. And if they're still in the province, they're probably not making their living at film. Mm-hmm. So you have to go into it knowing that. There's a freedom to it. There's a freedom knowing that you're like the only person out there doing it, and that I guess in that respect you have no, quote, competition. Mm-hmm. But this is a hostile environment for the arts that we find ourselves in. It's not just film, it's especially film these days. But I would love to see a pie chart about how the government expenditures go and how big that sliver is that goes to arts, and how every year that sliver just gets smaller and smaller. Not valuing art is not valuing culture. So
that's a big reason I wanted to start not just the podcast portion, but this website in general, was because you spoke a little bit earlier about how people who want to make a living as in the arts in Saskatoon or Saskatchewan are kind of crazy, or maybe there's some inordinately large ego at work that allows them to think that they can actually do it. And
I take that if you're independently wealthy, just go crazy.
Yeah.
But if you want to eat like I do, and have a few hours in a given week where you can put your feet up and relax, it's a tough road to hoe. That said, I have the utmost respect for anybody who's doing any kind of art in this province. Anybody who's sticking it out, and it's not because they have to, they're stranded, they have no choice. This is where we live, and art is everywhere, and this place counts. I'm on your side. I just want to be real that not a lot of people are. They will build another football arena before they will spend a fraction of the price on a new theater.
Do you think that's why you were able to find people who showed the commitment and passion that you had as well, and had that in common, was because they know that they have to be banded together in a place, in a center like Saskatoon, where that kind of storytelling won't happen unless they take that approach and have that kind of attitude?
Yeah, it's true, but hungry artists are like hot girls. Contrary to popular belief, they are everywhere.
Yeah, hungry artists, but not hungry artists who are also good.
Yeah, well, and hungry.
Like, you found really talented people to help you with your project and be part of it, so...
people who have taken a stab at working professionally, and that are completely talented enough to work professionally, but can't because of where they live.
Yeah.
So what advice would I give? Well, if you're going to stick it out here, I guess that would be, if you're going to stay in Saskatchewan and you are going to do it, definitely connect yourself with other creative people. Don't take the burden all on by yourself. And if you can do it in bites, it's the way to go. Like I said, when we planned the production to have 3 distinct shooting sets. That helped us a lot. It gave us prep time going into and coming out of each step, and air in between. And it was helpful for my actors too, because 3 years go by between the two things, so we wanted them to look distinctly different. You don't look vastly different after 3 years, but I wanted people to be able to look at the film and say, I know where I am just because Matt has a beard.
He's got some color in his face.
Yeah, he's got a beard in one timeline and not in the other one. So right away you have that visual cue. I think that you can help yourself. There are things you can do from the pre-production end. Pre-production doesn't cost you anything but time and personal energy. But as much as you can plan and just make all those plans knowing that on any given day you're going to have to adapt. But if you come in as prepared as you can be, it makes for smoother shooting days. It was always the days where we had clear storyboards and we knew where we were and what we were going to do. If there's a couple days we're going to go find a section of woods and we're going to shoot this how it feels right, then you're there forever, right? You go in with a plan that's going to help you every single time. And do stay in Saskatchewan because, I don't want to be, the only filmmaker in Saskatchewan. That's what you said, like how you introduced the guy making a movie in Saskatoon right now. I know there are other people that are working on film, but we need to spread the word. We need a support
system.
The
arts community in general needs to expand. I mean, Saskatoon is a growing community. I hear that every day, but I still feel like when it comes to the indie theater scene, anyway, the majority of people who want to support you and come out are other theater professionals.
Yeah.
And
everybody's looking for a gig, especially people who are like sacked up with the union and everything. Like we have Shakespeare in Saskatchewan, we have Persephone, and you're not you maybe get one play a year out of the season of Persephone, and maybe you get lucky enough to be in the regular troupe at Shakespeare, but that's still best case scenario, 2 gigs a year.
Yeah. So
if you if you want to work and train and hone your skills, you can't work professionally. You have to go under the radar. You have to just do it. And when you do that, you don't get paid. So I just go into it real. Like, know that there's no immediate paycheck and that there's going to be hard days and that you have to go into it looking at the product itself being the payday. Me being able to put up a screening of this, hopefully at the Broadway, and to sit in an audience and hear people react, as terrifying as I'm sure that will be amazing to me.
Will that be the moment where you feel like this circle's come complete now, and
I get chills thinking about it. I don't know, like, if I will be non-verbal that day, because I remember the first day I moved to Saskatoon, I thought my life was ruined because my parents had rudely yanked me from small town Alberta to live in Saskatchewan. I remember watching the movie Fubar and having chills, thinking if I'd stayed in Beaumont, Alberta, that's who I would be. But I took a walk from this apartment that my mom was living in while she was looking for a house for us to live in, and I was unhappy and just exploring Saskatoon for the first time by myself. And I walked up Broadway and I saw the Broadway theater, and I thought to myself, wouldn't it be cool if I got to watch a movie that I made in like an old-fashioned theater like that? And I was like 13. So to have that bookended and actually have it happen, like it would blow my mind. Like I don't know how I would react. I don't know how I will react. Like if we have to say something before or after the film, I seriously might be in trouble.
Yeah.
Because the reality of having it shown there, even if it doesn't get seen anywhere else to me, like that's my payday. And I think if you're going into film in Saskatchewan, that's about as modest as you want to approach it. Everything else is gravy. Then if I make money over this, or if I get another project out of it, it's all gravy. But at the end of the day, I have this finished product, and that's my goal. That's my trophy. That's my paycheck. How I'm going to eat that week, I don't know, but I will have a smile on my face. Thank you. And just generally speaking, to anyone out there, if you want to do stuff, generally speaking, do it. You will feel better even if you finishing a short story or like you're thinking about, I don't know, running in the morning. The second you actually do it, it really does feel better. The first step, it's a cliche, the first step is in a lot of ways the hardest, you know?
Yeah.
I really felt kind of weird about starting a horror podcast. I honestly thought like
I did.
People are going to make fun of me, and it's like, oh, how many people are not listening to your podcast this week, Larry? And I've had, and a few people have rolled their eyes. I'm not going to lie, but I have never regretted doing it.
Yeah, I think we've all had the same experience. I find a lot of people's eyes do glaze over if they find out that they get really excited when they're like, "Oh, you do a podcast," and then as soon as you explain what it is, their kind of eyes glaze over, and they're like,
"It's just not meant for them." Like it's for meant. Like,
it is a very niche thing.
Yeah. But the thing is, that's what's awesome for us too is that we've been lucky enough to latch on to people who are interesting and fun people to talk to. They're just like us, and like the fact that we get the conversation going among some people about horror movies is exciting enough for me. Like that's enough for me to say fuck all the people who make fun of me for doing this. I work with people who would never ever understand something like this, and that's fine. Everyone's got their own thing, but this is the best thing I've ever done for myself is this podcast. So I totally agree.
We just reviewed the remake of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, right? There are people who would just be horrified that I endorsed that movie.
Oh, I know.
Like, really?
You're a maniac.
Seriously? Are you well? It's like, no, it is exactly what it means to be, and that's how I'm going to grade this movie. What was it trying to do, and what did it accomplish?
Yeah, exactly.
No, but I really like that you're saying about like the hardest step is doing it, because you'll have so many people that talk about doing something as simple as going out and running, or starting a podcast, or even having a part in a movie like you did, and it's a lot of people talk the talk, they don't walk the walk. Not saying that doing a podcast is hard, but it's not the easiest thing.
It's definitely not.
Like there's always a reason to not do that and have something else to do instead.
Like we come on here and joke around and stuff, and we talk about how we're very carefree about it, but there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that people don't know about.
That's the one thing that I feel like I'm a little bit worried that some people, like, we might give off the vibe that we don't give a shit, which is totally not true at all. It's just like
it's a front. I think.
But the thing is, I think I'm worried about people listening and being like, these guys don't actually put any effort into what they're doing. Like we work our fucking asses off to get 3 people here a week.
If anything, we care too much. Like, I don't know about you. Like, I have literally thousands of movies in my house.
Yeah.
And it causes friction with my wife. Like, I have a fucking problem.
Yeah.
Okay. Some people,
man, if it's what makes you happy, how much is it a problem?
Some people have a cocaine problem. I have a cheap horror movie problem.
Yeah.
If it's a horror movie that's under $5, I kind of want it.
When it's got that $2.99 or $3.99 sticker, I'm like, ooh.
Some of us are just all of the above. But man, it's awesome to have you here. I want to talk a little bit more about horror movies here. Cool. Then, what are the things that have gotten your attention recently? So, like, you're a seasoned vet of the horror genre.
Sorry, I was just going to ask before we do that question. I think it'd be kind of good to go like, what are your genres within horror?
Yeah, what's your favorite subgenre?
Yeah, what's your favorite Sorry, and then we can go on to like what's coming up recently that you like.
Okay, I'll go controversial for you right away.
Sure.
Because they're 2 of the most maligned genres in horror. Well, one of them's a genre, one of them's actually just kind of an approach.
Okay.
Found footage.
I love zombie movies.
Okay.
I know everybody's hard on zombie movies, and I know that we've had a glut in the last 10 years. I get it.
Yeah, it's definitely been a watered down.
I understand it. I grew up in the 80s and 90s loving zombies, and throughout the 90s, until, you have to understand, 28 Days Later and that Dawn of the Dead remake revitalized them. Finding a good zombie movie was just this rare golden treasure thing. So yeah, I really valued them and totally embraced the new modern age of zombie. I will still, to this day, defend Walking Dead, no matter how much people bitch about that.
Oh, we definitely have.
Are you still watching and everything too?
I'm not current.
Okay.
But I'm up to the previous.
Okay.
The previous
6, I think. Is it 6?
So you still are following it more than anyone I know.
Right.
That's
Hey, I watched all the
people
last season.
I wait for the season to air, and then I watch the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's typically how I go, because I don't like
But there's so much, especially with that show. I mean, because I just hop back on and watch last season. Is it takes so long to get any sort of story out of it, because they do commercials, and then they actually replay a little bit of what happened before the commercial. So you have a 5-minute commercial, then you're seeing a little bit of what happened before,
which is the benefit of waiting for it all to air and watching it all
exactly.
at
Yeah,
once.
which is a benefit to you.
Yeah. And I've been a fan of the book, so like seeing what they do different from the book. And again, it's been the show that I've wanted since I was 12, and they finally made it, and it was huge. So
Yeah.
I will defend The Walking Dead, and
Well,
I will.
there's a
continue.
lot of good shit in it. I just think it's hard to keep that consistent.
And the other thing that I will defend, and you called me on it, just mainly because I'm sick of people maligning it, is the found footage.
Yeah.
Found footage.
actually, yeah.
Boozy's a found footage guy.
A lot of people just will say, I don't watch found footage. Found footage movie, they'll dismiss it completely. And as far as I'm concerned, that's like saying, I don't like black and white movies. Or I don't like handheld camera.
Yeah.
It's how you're telling a story. It's not a story. To dismiss an entire
Genre.
approach
Yeah.
is so
Well, because it's been proven that there's tons of amazing found footage movies out there.
and it's true that there's a lot of terrible ones.
Yeah,
but
it's
you
the
know
same
what,
with
you
everything.
guys? There's a lot of terrible monster movies, and there are millions of terrible slasher movies.
Yep.
And for some reason, found footage has all this stink on it, and I'm here to say, fucking leave them alone, man. If you're a low-budget filmmaker, by the way, found footage makes so much goddamn sense. Bear down your location, single camera, forced perspective. I understand why it's popular, and I understand why a lot of them suck, because they're made by amateurs with no money.
Yeah.
But
And
to
also
just
no
dismiss
storytelling
it,
as well.
Well, that's the key ingredient.
Yeah, 'cause-
that's the key ingredient that the found footage is not dependent. Well, every movie is dependent on, maybe especially found footage.
Yeah.
But if you're not telling a good story, you're fucked anyway.
Yeah, because I mean that point of when found footage first came out, where you could just have people be scared if you just walked around in the woods for a while, and you're like, oh, the woods are terrifying. And then it's been so long now that you've seen how many movies where they try and rely on the fact that they're in a forest or something, you're supposed to be scared. It doesn't work as well. You need to actually have a story to go with it.
I think that's why people actually shit on found footage a lot, and I think it's because, in our this day and age, found footage is almost like the super deep sequels that the 80s had, or the 90s, like the Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5. It's like the studio wants to make some money. Where can we put our eggs? Let's get another get another Freddy movie going. Whatever, it'll be cheap. Just fucking give them the money, and then we'll make a wicked payback there. And the same thing with that became a big studio move. Is just everything's got to be found footage, and that's why. So I understand people getting tired of it. But there's still a lot of good shit in it. There's a lot of stuff that people are dismissing and they're skipping over because they're too proud to just give something like that an example, a shot.
Just generally speaking, and I have my blind areas too. Again, I just can't get excited about watching a musical, and I'm probably missed out on a lot of good experiences.
That's surprising from a theater guy too.
I know. I mean, but I'll see it on a stage. Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
But for some reason, as a film, I'm not.
It takes away that aura, I guess, from watching it live.
And I think the reason that maybe a lot of filmmakers kind of like found footage, because I've noticed that is that it's the insider baseball thing. When you watch a lot of films, if you've been on the set of a lot of movies, you can sort of easily distract yourself by figuring out how they did that shot and how this was happening. And I find with the forced perspective, it's such an experiential thing that I will get jumped when I wouldn't. In a regular straightly shot film, that wouldn't have made me jump, but because of this found footage one, it caught me.
You can kind of look and go okay, there's the background, and to the right they have this going on off screen. It's there even though they're not showing it.
There's rough amateur quality to it, but you still have specificity. You still have to choose your shots, and I think when done well, they can be very frightening. And very frightening is what I'm looking for when I'm watching a horror.
Not to put you on the spot, but what are some of the found footage movies that you really like?
Okay. Well, have you seen Grave Encounters?
Yes.
A guilty pleasure movie. It's a total ghost house jump movie.
Yeah.
But it worked way better than I thought it would. Troll Hunter.
Troll Hunter's awesome.
Troll Hunter's fantastic.
Troll
get
Hunter's
behind that.
fucking awesome.
I've seen Grave Hunters. I'm just kind of or Grave Encounters, and I'm continue.
No, again, that's another one of those movies where I was expecting nothing of it, right? As we've seen this movie before, they're going to investigate this creepy haunted facility, and you feel like you've seen the movie just by seeing the trailer, and the movie surprised me. Like, I jumped several times. I was sort of amused by the central character, what a chotch he was at the beginning, to what a broken individual he turned in by the end of it.
I gotta give it another watch.
It way exceeded my expectations.
I've heard the second one's even better.
I would disagree with that,
Okay.
but there are people who defend it. There's an Australian film called The Tunnel.
Yes. That is a fantastic movie.
Yeah, and another one, this is more faux documentary, but another great Australian one called Lake Mungo.
Just watched that for the first time.
I have
Chilling.
that
Yeah,
ready to go, and I haven't seen it yet.
That's the one where I think I told, like, when I was reviewing it on here, my girlfriend and I watched it, and it fucking bothered us so bad.
Right.
And like, we had been watching horror movies all day, and we never stopped watching horror movies, but after that one, it was just like,
We need a break.
fuck, like, let's put on Food Network.
Yeah,
Like,
because it
it was,
feel like an episode of The Simpsons. That'd be
yeah,
okay.
and it's not like it necessarily even, like, really scared me. It just, like you said, chilling.
Yeah.
It got under my skin.
Yeah.
Like, it was very effective in that way.
Have you seen The Bay?
Yeah, I really like that one.
Yeah, I don't know if that's strictly a found footage because it's kind of all over the
It's like
place, but
faux
it's a
documentary.
yeah,
Yeah.
faux. But that
That's-
was fantastic.
The same thing I'm talking about, where you have a forced perspective.
Yeah.
I don't mind if you jump from camera to camera, or if you sort of use, the media or security footage, however you want to do it. But I think we all know what we're talking about,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Where you're sort of trying to present this as a real quote unquote.
Yeah, like you're watching the footage after and going like, what happened
This
here?
is Faces of Death. You shouldn't be.
Yeah,
seeing
you're
this
the
footage.
detective or whatever.
Exactly. So yeah, there's quite a few of them that I like. The Last Exorcism, the first one, I quite
Awesome.
liked.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that one in a while.
Even some of the more Hollywood versions of them that I think kind of cheat the line a little bit. I think there's a really good sequences in that As Above, So Below movie.
I agree.
I thought that was such a good idea for a movie that just went nowhere.
But again, there's this really solid, isolated, like...
It's just the setting, man. Like, it won me over just because that's a movie that everyone shits on, and I get it.
Yeah.
But for some reason, I liked it.
They did... Aja produced this one called The Pyramid, which
Yeah, I
really
just watched that one.
frustrates me because it's quite scary, but it fails in the found footage. It starts off as a found footage movie, and at some point, it
Yeah.
just becomes a movie.
Have you seen
And
The Pyramid, Boozy?
That is distracting to me. Pick a lane.
Because also,
No.
like, because that's the thing too, is it's a monster movie, and it's unique as fuck in the monster element.
Yeah.
the
but-
Pyramid.
Yeah, and I would say watch it just because, okay,
It's flawed, but it's
it
worth
is
a look.
very flawed, but like the like it gets so ridiculous that I recommend it. Like it's what would you even call they're like Sphinx cats?
Yeah.
Oh, for fuck's
It's
sake!
like it's in a
They get attacked by
a
mummified
pyramid.
cats at one point.
yeah.
Oh, God.
But you gotta watch it, man. Because and the thing is, it is very like CGI at times. But
Yeah.
like I feel like the found footage, like where they put in the night vision or whatever,
Right.
it works in its favor a little bit.
I think
But
that's
it's so goofy.
I think
sure
that's
there's
so
a bunch
cool.
I'm missing now. I'm gonna afterwards. I'm gonna think.
Yeah.
Oh, I should have mentioned.
You're gonna
this.
listen to all that, yeah. I think that's so cool that you mentioned The Tunnel. I think that's one movie that no
God,
one's
nice.
really seen, and I think it's a fantastic film. I watched it in the dark, alone at night, and I was terrified.
Yeah.
I think that's a fantastic found footage film.
still have never seen
Paranormal Activity 1 and 3.
I like 1,
I-
2, and 3.
Really?
I actually just bought 3 this weekend. I went to
Three's
High
the best,
Tech
though.
because
Yeah.
you guys were talking about all the cheap movies. I went there and bought the Blu-ray of it because I was like, 3 was definitely my favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah, 3 was awesome.
Well, again, because 3 was set in the 80s. That was my childhood that they
Yeah.
were talking about. So
Yeah.
it just got me personally.
Yeah,
Seeing
I
that
just
Teddy
think
Ruxpin doll was like, yeah, that's my
Yeah,
house. That's my fucking
my
house.
sister had a Teddy Ruxpin doll, and I think that made me like that movie more too. 'Cause it was fucking terrifying. That's awesome. So what are things like recently? Like, what's something that you've seen in the last couple weeks, maybe this year?
the last couple years.
Yeah.
like,
Okay. The most recent one that I brought that I was going to see if you guys had a thing on Train to Busan.
That was our number one of those.
Yeah, we went to it when it was playing at Broadway, and not expecting it to be as amazing as it was.
It blew my fucking mind. And I love zombie movies. And, like, again, I put it in the same company as 28 Days
Oh,
Later.
I put it with
100%.
Dawn of the Dead. Like
Yeah.
it's right up there.
It's an amazing movie, and there's an animated prequel, apparently.
Yeah, Soul Station. I still haven't seen it,
Soul
but
Station.
I've heard not as good things about. But it's on Shudder.
Oh, yeah?
But I've been wanting to watch it. Yeah, because that was we did when we started the show in 2016. So we did our top 10s of 2016,
Right.
and all three of us had Train to Busan as our number one.
Nice.
Love that movie.
Yeah.
I guess some of the less recent recommendations, tonally close to what we're going to be talking about here, Session 9, The Last Winter.
Never seen it.
I'm
Never
going to
even
write
heard
that
of it.
down because I haven't seen it.
It's written and directed by Larry Fessenden.
Okay, is this a Wendigo?
He also did a movie called Wendigo.
Wendigo, okay, yeah. But
This is set in the Arctic. There are a bunch of people drilling there, and this guy is sent out to do an environmental assessment to see if they should keep on going.
I feel like I've seen this, actually.
It seems very clear that when he gets there, he wants to shut them down, but they're obviously playing a game of chess. But as things are thawing, something has thawed out of the ice, and it seems to affect everybody a little differently, and people start falling apart. And it's a slow burn, much like Session 9, but I honestly think if you like Session 9, check that.
The more you talk about it, I'm pretty sure I've seen this.
Ron Perlman?
Ron Perlman, yeah, Helmor's in it. Yeah.
Oh, is this... Yes, I have seen this because it has a very terrifying ending.
It does. I don't want to spoil it necessarily.
No, neither do I.
A lot of people have seen it, but it's totally worth
I know exactly. Yeah, now that I'm
it's at
talking
the
about...
top of my list. I'll watch it for next week.
Sweet.
Yeah, Larry Fessenden's one because he shows up at the end of Session 9.
That's correct.
He's a low budget,
a friend of horror. I like to talk about him in my show all the time. I think of him as my sort of spirit animal. Like,
yeah, totally.
Honestly, if I could be in that position where every year he produces a couple of horror movies, and every 2 or 3 years he writes and directs one, and that's what he's been doing for the last 15 years, and I think that's a pretty fucking enviable place to
totally.
be.
And he's never like really blown up, but a lot of people who have blown up state him as one of their main inspirations, and like he was someone who like helped them get into the business and helped them with their horror movies. So that's pretty awesome.
He makes incredibly low budget movies, and and he makes them distinctly his. And a lot of times I will say it'll be a love-hate relationship reaction, but I always find it's worth checking out. So yeah, definitely The Last Winter. He produced a movie called We Are Still Here.
I was just about to mention that
one.
Okay. Yeah. I talked about that last year.
That movie.
Really, really, again, caught me off guard. I thought it was going to be this sort of forgettable PG ghost movie, and it turned all Evil Dead 2 in the second act.
Rank.
So it got pretty real.
It was a brutal movie at times.
I brought some to say. I knew you guys wanted to talk about shit here, so...
Oh, you actually have The Last Winter. That's fucking awesome.
Oh, sweet.
Triangle.
That's been on my list forever.
This is a Christopher Smith, it's a British movie.
Yeah.
This woman is being taken on a cruise to get away. She lives an incredibly stressful life. Her son's severely disabled, and they enter a storm, and they find this abandoned ship, and things just slowly start to spiral more and more out of control.
I think I've seen this.
It shows up on like every list of movies that are amazing that you haven't seen before.
Do you guys know Hellbenders?
I've never even heard of Hellbenders.
Okay.
I know that one.
J.T. Petty. He wrote and directed a horror western, which I love, called The Burrowers.
I
just watched this like 3 weeks ago. Yeah.
It's a really good movie, right?
I think it could have been better, but the idea was so good that it kept me... I found that the third act fell apart for me.
There's something so ugly about it that it's almost off-putting, but it's a way Homer. Like, it's grown in my esteem.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Where, like, at the end, they were kind of just, like, they threw in, like, another villain, and you're like, well, they already have the Burrowers. Why do you need another villain?
Yeah. And it also seemed to me almost like a competition of, like, how dark can we make this end?
Yeah.
Like, how dark can we...
But it's such a cool idea.
Again, I wouldn't talk anybody out of watching it. Anyway, the same writer-director did this movie, Hellbenders. Okay, here's your premise. You got a bunch of priests who have to live in sin. Like, they have to, by the nature of their jobs, they have to commit sins and break commandments, because their job is to exorcise demons. They grab hold of the demon, they kill themselves, and they literally drag the demon to hell with them. And it's a comedy.
I was going to say, at the start, it sounded like you were describing a porno.
Because Clifton
Nobody talks about this movie, and it is fucking hilarious.
Clifton Collins Jr. is in like so many things too. Like he's in that Star Trek. He's in Capote. Yeah. Like he's in.
Fessenden shows up in this one too.
Oh, okay, I'm writing all of these down. That's on my phone's out, by the way. I've seen this one. I love it.
I brought the Grave Encounters to talk about Dagon. Anyone know Dagon?
I know Dagon.
No.
Okay, here's the thing. This is a cautionary tale. Stuart Gordon. We know Stuart Gordon, Reanimator,
and
Dolls. He's done a lot of cool genre work. This is based off an H.P. Lovecraft, and it will give you one of the best adaptations of H.P. Lovecraft that you've ever seen.
Yeah.
But it will also give you some of the worst CGI
Buziak
you've
loves
ever
that.
seen, counterbalanced by some of the best prosthetic effects you have ever seen.
It's been a long time since I've seen it. I gotta revisit it.
Incredibly unstable in its quality from scene to scene. Some of the performances are really strong. Some of the performances seem like they're dubbed in. But the movie is just so fucking crazy.
What years? This seems like early 2000s.
I want to say late 90s, early aughts, something like that. Yeah. So yeah,
that looks. Actually, I think I one of my friends has that.
Oh, you brought more. Is this what you were gonna? Oh, we have an episode on this coming up.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, Andy Preller of Erie International. Shout out. He's holding Cemetery Man.
I just wanted to shout out to you guys, or you can find it as Delamorte.
Yeah.
When I was talking about in the 90s, when I was desperate for more zombie movies and anything I could get my hands on. Well, I got my hands on this Cemetery Man. And again, much like Dagon, it's scene to scene, completely bonkers. There's some really uncomfortable, really graphic sex in it. But
that's also,
it's so far so good. It's also just hypnotic. It's beautifully shot. It's funny. It's scary. It's gross. You can't compare it to anything else. People love, people hate, but again, watch it.
That one's
just
coming up.
Demands to be watched.
Listener appreciation episode coming up in I think 3 or 4 weeks.
I see a swastika already.
I got a couple more for you here. Blood Creek, anyone?
I've never seen Blood Creek. I've seen that cover, but I've never seen it.
Okay, I'll read.
Oh yes.
Here's the cast, just to recap: Michael Fassbender, Shea Wiggum, Henry Cavill,
whoa, holy shit,
Emma Booth. Directed by Joel Schumacher.
What?
Nazi zombies.
What
do I need to say anymore?
Yeah.
Well, I'm writing it down.
On this movie?
Batman Forever?
From the director of Batman and Robin.
Yeah. Oh, it's the guy from Prison Break.
Yeah.
And sorry, Blade Trinity.
So, and that movie again, it's just insane the people that are in it. It's insane that Joel Schumacher directed. It's insane the subject matter that it is. The story, there's nothing not crazy about it. And again, I feel sometimes like I'm the only person in the world that's seen the movie, and it makes me crazy.
I think you are, because I remember this being on the shelves when I worked in video stores, and I was just like, this looks awful. And
you know what? It's kind of nice though sometimes having those movies where it's like, only I've seen this and only I enjoy it.
Yeah.
This is mine.
The last one that I brought to share with you guys, and again, I was just seeing what have you seen, what have you not? Night of the Creeps?
That's a favorite. You've seen Night of the Creeps, Boozy, right? Man, you watched this with me and Diego right before we were thinking about starting the podcast, where it's the prom. It thrilled me.
The movie has,
the
movie has everything, okay? Yeah. It's got aliens, it's got zombies, it's set in the 50s and the 80s, it's got a serial killer, it's got a wisecracking cop. The characters are named after JC, John Carpenter, and Sean Cunningham, Sean S. Cunningham.
Yeah.
It's wall to wall.
It's Alien.
Man, it's amazing.
I think Slither took more than
a few
things from it.
Yeah.
It's fantastic, and it's genuinely 80s.
Yeah.
Like when
it's one of the most 80s movies.
It's so like, 80s,
it's like
but in such a delicious way, you guys.
It's like Saved by the Bell, but a horror movie. I love that movie, and that's Diego, the other co-host who's not here. That's one of his favorite movies of all time.
Nice.
Yeah, well, and I know we spoke with Lee Beckman about him coming on here, and he chose Night of the Creeps. Like, it was in like his 5 movies he was choosing. I was like, just a heads up, we're probably going to choose Night of the Creeps because that's like Diego's favorite movie.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Well, so yeah, those are the ones I brought. And again, I figured you guys would have heard of most of them, but
there's a couple here that we haven't seen.
There's some in there. And again, you may not like Dagon the same way I do. I know that one
I've seen Dagon.
It might have hit me personally, but
I love that you reminded me of The Last Winter because I have to watch that again. I remember it being really good. Yeah,
it's so good, dude. It's so
good.
Thank
Thank you so much for bringing us some suggestions. That's that's a first, so you're already our best guest.
And I also brought Grave Encounters. See, I'm a fan, proof positive.
And you brought a copy of Session 9, which is very hard to find.
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about when I carry these. By the way, if you listen to my podcast, every movie that we review is accounted for in my collection. If not, usually I'll mention it. I'll say, I don't actually own this movie, I destroyed Lee and I when we reviewed Day of the Dead 2: Contagium.
Yeah.
After the review was over, we physically destroyed the DVD.
That reminds me of what?
Do you own Resurrection? Halloween Resurrection?
I do, but it's part of a 2-pack with H2O.
Okay.
So I can't destroy it without also destroying H2O. And
I feel like you could get away with both.
Yeah. We don't see eye to eye on Halloween. That's one thing we've noticed.
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
I've laid my case bare on Halloween.
That's awesome, man. Well, thanks so much for bringing all those recommendations, because I wrote all those. I even wrote. I've seen Grave Encounters. I wasn't a fan, but I want to revisit it because the only thing I remember that I didn't like that took me out of it is I hate the droopy face shit.
Right.
Like, and
that was one of the first ones to really
get
into
really was.
that.
And it was just like, to me, it's just like that to me felt cheap. But
well, it was cheap. That's the other thing I like about it. It was made in Canada for no money.
Yeah. So
the warehouse the hospital they shot it in is a place where they shoot outside of Vancouver. It's supposed to be one of the most shot buildings in the country.
And not the one in Ginger Snaps too?
Yeah, they shot a lot of X-Files and Millennium episodes.
I think you're actually right.
Yeah, I think it's the same place they did Ginger Snaps too.
Yeah. So check it out.
Sweet, man, that's awesome. So.
Thank you for listening to this special edition of Rank and Review. There's just no way I could thank everybody who were involved in making this movie Book of Trespasses come to fruition. I do want to make a special shout out for my cast, of course, and my two main creative collaborators, Gareth Nichol and Jared Barry. I will never, ever be able to pay you guys back for all the work you guys did. You find your host and random Canadian fairly humbled here. It's strange days for me. I feel like all this work has sort of led to this place, and I don't know what that means exactly. If it means we get a film distributed, or if it means that we just get to have a celebration amongst our friends. It feels like a win to me. And this podcast feels like a win to me. And wherever you are, however this podcast is finding your ears, wherever you are in the world, I'm sure there are people in that corner who are trying with all of their hearts to make art. Support them. I know that the world's tiniest violin plays for the artists. I know a lot of people don't value it, but I do, because it is valuable. It's important. If you do not respect art, you do not respect culture. And if you do not respect culture, then you do not respect both the productivity and the ability and the creative energy that is within every human being. We can't all of us be plumbers and lawyers. Some of us are, I guess, driven to create. That sounds really weird coming out of my mouth, but I do feel like if I wasn't making this movie, if I wasn't doing this podcast, if I wasn't doing something creative, I would be in a mental institution somewhere. I value my listeners, and I hope to find an audience for this film. Thank you for listening to Rank and Review, and thank you for helping to spread the word on Book of Trespasses. Rank and Review shall return. I don't want you guys to worry about that. We'll go back to our regular format next episode. Lee Beckman and I are going to take on the Child's Play franchise. You've got that to look forward to, and even with this movie going on, you can hope to hear new episodes of Rank and Review every other Wednesday. This is your host and random Canadian saying thanks for listening. Especially this episode, you guys. Thanks for listening.